What's going on, guys? Today we are back with another walleye fishing video, and very excited. We finally have had fish move out to some of like the main summer stuff, some of this little bit deeper stuff. You know, we've been fishing a lot of like that 8 to like 15 feet in the last couple weeks here, and it's very exciting that these fish have kind of pushed out. We got water temps in the low 70s now, as many of you are probably experiencing. We have fish pushing out to a lot of these main lake humps, deeper point extensions, things of this nature. A lot of that 15 to 22 foot now, which is great to see them there because it opens up a whole different amount of lures in which you can catch these fish on. And today's video is all about one of my absolutely favorite ways to catch these summer walleyes, and it is unbelievably effective. You guys have probably heard about it, and it is the snap jigging style lead lures. This is the Acme Hyper Rattle, and is one of my absolutely favorite tools to catch these fish when they get out on some of this deeper structure, really for the remainder of the season. This is a technique that you've probably seen before, maybe on a TV show, maybe on YouTube, maybe on one of my videos, but the specifics of it are really what catches you more fish. And if you are unfamiliar with catching fish using these lures, this should be a great video to kind of key in on. One of the most productive, definitely the most innovative, and it's just a crazy way to fish that gets a crazy amount of bites, really for fish that are hungry or fish that are negative or fish that are neutral. So stay tuned, we're gonna blast off, find some fish, and hopefully catch a bunch of them hyper rattling. So stay tuned, let's get it going on. All right, so what we're doing right now is we're driving around with the trolling motor. We're actually looking for fish on kind of a rock finger here, and I'm ready to spot lock if I see fish. I'm also ready to drop. So I got my rod ready to go. This is not see fish, kind of take your time and then drop all of a sudden. What you're trying to do here is see fish, drop immediately, right? And this is kind of called like sharpshooting fish, for the most part is kind of what guys call it. But the point is here is that we're not dropping unless we see fish, which is always a good tip, but especially a good tip for something like this, where you just gotta be getting that bait right in front of these fish very quick, right? Sometimes it takes longer than it will other times. There's a couple of them right there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drop straight down. I'm also gonna spot lock at the same time here. That bait gets down the bottom at 22 feet of water super fast. Now I'm just snapping this bait right on the bottom. We'll talk all about how you're gonna wanna fish this. But the point is here, there's definitely some fish down there. Oh, look at that. Right away. That's exactly how it's supposed to go. See fish, drop down into them, catch fish, and here we got a nice walleye. And this is why this is such a cool way to fish, because it is just like immediate, right? You see fish, you drop in them, and you catch them. And there we go. For fishing for about 1 minute, we already have the first walleye of the day. It's actually alarmingly quick. This is my first time doing this year. You can see just how fast that is. And he's got that hyper rattle right in the corner of his mouth, right where you want it. And there we go. Not a big one there, but a nice about 19 incher to start. Super fast, super quick. There he goes. He's already back in the water. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is the bait itself, right? Now, there's several companies who make these. This one's my favorite. I've been using it for years, and it's basically indestructible, right? The Acme Hyper Rattle, which is what this is, comes in 3 different sizes. I like the bigger size. I like the bigger profile, and I like the fact that it sinks extremely quick. If I'm fishing a little bit shallower, sometimes I'll go down to the next size smaller, but this is the 28 gram. I think it's like a 2 inch, and it is very heavy. It's almost an ounce. It's extremely fast sinking, and fish is extremely fast. And basically what it is, you know, you got a couple of the tie points here. I always kind of go with that front one like that, and I always like to put a snap in there, right? Now this bait's super heavy, so you can obviously drop it, and this is kind of the key to this bait, is when you see fish you can get in them very quickly, right? Or it takes let's say you're fishing 30 feet of water with like a 1/4 ounce jig or even a 1/2 ounce jig. This bait's almost an ounce. So one thing that, you know, this style of baits did to basically revolutionize walleye jigging is that you can fish extremely fast in 30 feet of water, right? There's not a whole lot of other things you can do super fast in 30 feet of water and catch fish, maybe besides trolling, right? Or if you were gonna jig a 1 ounce jig in a plastic or something like that. So basically the premise of this bait is that super fast sinking, and it fishes extremely quickly, and it's very much a triggering style of bite, right? This isn't like, you know, we're crawling something around, trying to make it look super finessey and good. This is absolute deep water power fishing tool right here, right? You can cast it, you can go vertical, and we'll talk about how we work it here in a second. But this is what makes this bait so important and so effective, is that you can fish deep water very, very fast. And I think a lot of guys have not even tapped into how powerful this style of lure is yet. But basically you can see, you know, it's got a tail piece on here, a couple of tie points, hooks on the front and back. I leave those on, plus the treble on there, which kind of slides so it doesn't pivot hard and lose fish a lot. And you know, when basically you're putting this thing in the water and letting it hit bottom, it's going zoom, 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 and just going super fast. And most of the time what these fish are doing is they're actually trapping it to bottom. Sometimes if they're very aggressive, you might feel that big line punch, but more times than not, you're gonna go to snap up again, and it's gonna be like you're snagged for a second. That fish is just, that bait's moving so fast, it sees that thing flying around, the bait hits bottom, the fish goes boom, and you go to rip up again, and they got it. And a lot of times, like, they'll be hooked right here, right under the chin, and that's because they're pounding that bait into bottom. I don't know if they think it's a minnow, if they think it's a crayfish, or what they think it is, but they are absolutely triggered by this bait, and that's why it's incredibly effective. Color-wise, there's a few different ones I like. Fish and stain water, I like some of the brighter stuff a lot more, but I love clown and purple especially, or some kind of perchy colors in the clear water stuff. And this clown one's kind of been the best one so far today, and we're gonna keep rolling with it. All right, here's our pot of fish. We're dropping down immediately. Bait's in the fish. Ooh, they chased it right down right away. This is generally a good sign. All we do is kind of just hop it and snap it in place. Wait for one to jump on. A lot of times it will not even take this long once they really get keyed in on this kind of stuff. They are all over it, just looking at it right now. There we go. That is exactly how it's supposed to go. It feels like it's probably a halfway decent fish. Oh yeah, I'm gonna grab the net. Not a super big one here, but you can see how effective that is. You know, you kind of see them down there. You spot lock, and just like that, we got a nice walleye in the bag, and he came off right in the net. And I'll kind of take a screenshot here so you can see my down imaging, and you can actually see the fish just sitting there right where they should be. And there's another beautiful walleye, and you can see how fast that is. It's, you know, obviously there's several keys to this whole thing. One is obviously being able to read down imaging and sonar very well, telling what's a walleye, telling what's a perch, and you know, recognizing that very quickly. This is a very quick and speedy way to fish, right? Once you see them, you're down, you're snapping that thing, and a lot of times it's gonna be a lot quicker than what I just showed. Basically, you're gonna drop down, make one snap, and they're gonna bite. This is just kind of like the start of the speed season, and summer's a lot about speed. It's a lot about triggering fish into bite. The water's much warmer, and these fish are much more likely to be able to move fast and bite, and yeah, you can see how effective that was right there. So how are we working these baits, right? It's obviously a fast, very aggressive, go, 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 go technique, and probably something that if you haven't done this before, most guys are not familiar with how to correctly work one of these. You might have seen it on like the Linders or whatever you saw it on, and it is an incredibly effective way to fish, but how you work it is the difference between pretty much catching none or being very successful with this. And it's kind of a learning curve. You know, a lot of guys are used to standard jig fishing, and it's nothing like that. So when I'm fishing vertical, I drop that bait, you know, I've seen my fish, I'm dropping down straight down on a slack line. I'm in 22 feet of water, and you can see how quickly that bait just hit bottom, right? Now, you know, how most guys like to jig is something like this, right? This is not at all what you're trying to do with this bait, right? With this bait, it is all about speed. And what you can think about is like jerk baiting for bass, right? If you're a big jerk bait bass guy, you know that you're always hitting that bait basically on a slack line, and then you're feeding it line back to get that bait to snap out to the side and kind of suspend there, right? It's a similar deal with this, right? So I like to get a slack line, and I like to hit this bait like this and drop my rod. Sometimes I'll do a couple of pops, drop my rod. A couple of pops, drop my rod. One big mistake guys do is they want to do something that looks like this. That's bad. All that bait's doing is going doom, and then it's just sinking horizontally like that. What it does when you hit it on a slack line once or twice, what's going to happen is that bait goes joom, joom, and then darts back a different direction. It's extremely erratic bait down there, right? And you definitely want to let that bait fall on a slack line. That is another key. Hit it, drop it on a slack line. Hit it, drop your bait on a slack line. You can see I'm doing this. Sometimes it's a one pop deal, sometimes you can hit it a bunch of times, but basically the premise here is that you're hitting that bait on a slack line. And we got a little bit of weeds here kind of gumming up the bottom, but it's a very speedy thing, right? And the reason why you don't feel a lot of bites is, number one, I think most of them come when the bait's on the bottom. Number two is because you want to produce that slack when the bait's falling. So you can imagine this thing just going and then darting down and gliding a different direction, right? And that's why most of them hit it off the bottom, because it's so fast and all over the place. They're just instinctually, they have to pin that thing to bottom, and they're all over it. And the other way you can do this, which we did not showcase today, but we definitely will, is on a cast. Now, one thing with casting these is you do not want to make like super crazy bomb casts. You're definitely going to be better off finding those fish, setting up 20-30 feet away from them, and doing something like this here. So I'm on the bottom right now. I'm gonna go pop, pop, and just like fishing vertical, I'm dropping my rod. Pop, drop my rod. Pop, pop, drop my rod. And I'll kind of mix it up. You know, if you're fishing for a lot of these really deep fish that are kind of like 3, 4, 5 feet off bottom sometimes, I mean, you can even do something like that and get that bait to come up, you know, 5, 6 feet. But this is pretty much the standard retrieve here, right? Snap, and I'm always creating slack on the fall, and I'm always hitting that bait on slack. If you try to hit this bait on a tight line and you're doing more of like a pull, that is not good. So imagine that line has just a little bit of slack in it, and you're hitting it like that, right? And that creates that bait to go and then fall back to bottom. And just like when you're going vertical, most of the time what's gonna happen when you're casting is you're gonna go, and there's just gonna be a bunch of weight right there, and you kind of do a double take a lot of times to get those fish on. And then you kind of rely on the medium light rod to kind of hold those fish. Some good rock. All right, so there's my pot of fish, and it's a good pot. So this is not gonna take more than a second probably. We know we're right in them. And just like that, fish on. You can see how quick that is. See those fish drop into them. And I almost always net these fish on jig and wrap just because boat flipping gets a little bit dicey. But you can see how quick and effective that is. There's another nice eater fish. See them, drop down into them, snap it a few times, fish on. It is just deadly, deadly effective. I think a lot of these fish that are out here right now are just eater sized ones. I think the bigger ones are still up shallow, but there's another good one to kind of show you guys what it's all about. Nice little 15-incher, and that's the deal. Obviously unbelievably effective. Another very important thing to this bait is obviously the rigging, right? This is a very strange, very bizarre way to fish. And although this is a heavy bait, I do not like fishing it on a heavy action rod or a rod suited for like, you know, some your very heavy 1 ounce jigs and stuff like that. I like fishing this on most of the time a medium or a medium light. And what you want to see is a rod that has a lot of tip load and will load up relatively far down into the rod, right? With a lot of backbone. If you have a rod that's just too light, like too much of a moderate action rod, the problem you're gonna run into is the whole rod's gonna almost fold up when you snap this thing because we're snapping it so hard. So this is the Elliott rod 7.3 medium light fast, and I really like this rod because it's got a lot of tip load, it has a lot of backbone. This is one of those models where if you're looking to pick up a great like kind of all around walleye rod, the 7.3 medium fast or medium light fast action rod is kind of a perfect one. I do a lot of jig and minnow stuff with this. You can pull spinners with this. You can, you know, do a ton of jig fishing, slip bobbering, and you can jig these things. And you definitely want to get away from like your, you know, your super fast, super actions throughout these rods. If you get into a rod that's too tip stiff, you're gonna end up pulling hooks on a lot of these fish because you can imagine snapping this thing around, all of a sudden a fish jumps on it and you snap that thing real hard again. A lot of times you're gonna pull hooks out of the fish. Now, another thing I do is I like running braid on these. Some guys will run mono. I kind of go back and forth, but I think for the most part, like braid. And if you're fishing straight mono, you can get away with a little bit stiffer rod because mono has so much stretch in the line that you can hit a fish hard, and a lot of times those hooks are gonna stick a lot better. Kind of like working a jerk bait for bass, right? Most guys are fishing mono or fluoro because they do have a little bit of stretch in there to kind of hold fish when you're snapping something hard like that, right? But because I'm using braid, I definitely like a medium light or a softer medium action rod, right? That's very important. So this is kind of my setup. You know, I run 10-pound braid on almost everything. Now, if I'm going to be doing a lot of casting with this, you know, today we're fishing mostly vertical, so I just have a uni knot tied in, right? The amount of times this bait spins is not really enough to do anything bad down there. basically just fishing vertical for short periods of time like I'm doing. You know, it's a lot of this driving around, seeing fish drop, jig, 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 jig. Either those fish bite or they leave and you reel up and do it again and over and over and over. Now, if I was doing a lot of casting with this bait all day, I'd probably tighten about a 2-foot lead and then a swivel up there into my braid. But for now, I'm just uni knotting it in, and most time fishing vertical, I just do the uni knot. Now, another thing to keep in mind is because you're hitting this bait so hard, right? You don't want to go with like a 6-pound lead, right? I like going up in size. I go like 12 or 15 on my fluoro lead. And that's just to basically any bait that you're constantly snapping hard on, especially on a slack line, you want something heavier that's gonna hold on there, right? You go too light, and periodically throughout the day, if you're doing this for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, whatever it is, you're gonna lose baits just because how hard you're snapping that bait, especially with braid. And really, I mean, you wouldn't run a mainline 6-pound mono either. I'd probably go with 10 or up for sure if you're running straight mono. So that's kind of the rigging side of things there. On bottom end, we got the Pissy Fun Carbonex 2000, just my classic walleye reel. And if you guys want to pick any of this stuff up, I'll go ahead and obviously link it below. But that's the deal. I always like running snaps in these, and definitely on the Acme Hyper Rattle, you want to snap this on because the line tie is meant for a snap. It's not meant to be tied on. All right, well, that is going to do it for us today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. The bite for doing this is not just super crazy on in my area yet, but it will be very soon. So I wanted to come out today and at least catch a few fish and talk about some of the specifics. So if this bite's happening, it's definitely about to happen in your area if it's not already, that you guys can go ahead and get in on the action. And if you guys want to pick up any of the equipment I talked about, it is kind of a specific thing. You definitely want to be looking for the right rod, and you know, how you're rigging up is pretty specific. So if you want to check out any of that stuff, like I said, I'll link it down below. But I appreciate you guys watching. It is Friday, so I have to get out of here because the lake is already getting too crazy for me. And yeah, another adventure is about to go down. But I appreciate you guys watching. If you're not yet, please subscribe and stay tuned for more content.